In this lesson, we'll learn how to work with joints in Cinema 4D. Joints are used to create skeletons for character animation. In our case, we'll use a set of joints to deform our fueling line. Now, in order to create a joint, we actually have a few ways of doing this. The traditional approach would be to first go to the orthographic view you'd need to draw the chain from, which in this case would be our front view. This would be the most convenient view to draw a chain in. And then next, we'd head over to Character and grab our Joint tool. Underneath Modifiers, this will give you an idea of how to create your chain. So you can see by holding down Control, we can use that to draw our chain. And if we'd like to move a joint in that chain, we'd simply use the left mouse button. And then we could use Shift to split a chain however many times we need. If you'd like to learn more about these settings, we do work with this extensively in our Introduction to Character Rigging tutorial. But let me just give you an idea of how this works. So if we were to hold down Control, notice we could start to click and create joints along our fueling line. Now this might take some time. Also, notice I'm adding several joints because the more joints we have, the smoother the deformations will be. However, these joints currently are not even. And here's another issue we have. Let's go ahead and hit the spacebar to exit our joint tool, and we'll go ahead and middle click again to go back to our perspective view. And what you can see is that our chain is not fit inside of the hose. The hose has a pretty different line of action here. If we were to go ahead and take a look at the main root of our chain, notice we have this root null. We can go ahead and grab that and kind of move that to have this chain fit within our hose, but you can see it might take a while to match every joint to the form of our hose. So instead, Cinema 4D has another way we can create a chain, and this is really neat because as long as we have a spline that follows the same line of action as our fueling line, we can go ahead and create a set of joints along that very spline. And that's what we're going to go ahead and do. So let's middle click on our root object. Let's go ahead and just delete the entire chain. Now next, selecting our fueling line, I might use the rectangle selection tool for that, just to get exactly to the selection we need. But with this selected, let's go ahead and choose Scroll to First Active to find our fueling line group. So if we were to expand the Sweep Nerves group, here we find the circle as well as the spline used to create this object. Now what we will be doing, as we explained before, is we will be collapsing this hose so that we can bind to geometry. We have issues when we try to bind to a spline, meaning that when we try to take a joint and tie it to an object so that it can deform that object, we have issues when it comes to splines. However, we can comfortably bind to geometry. Now before we go ahead and collapse this hose down, let's go ahead and clone its curve. So we use Control-C, Control-V, and once that curve has been cloned, we can now go back to our fueling line, and let's go ahead and make sure it is now collapsed. Okay, great. So from there, we can go ahead and go back to our spline object, and let's go ahead and take a closer look at it. Now, if we were to go to wireframe using the hotkey NG, you can see it's kind of hard to see our spline object. No worries, what we can do is go ahead and just hide this object so we can just focus on our spline. So with the fueling line selected, I'll go ahead and scroll back down, and I'll simply go ahead and hide it temporarily from our Objects Manager, clicking on this first dot here. Alright, great. So now, selecting the fueling line, I'll go ahead and go to Layers, and I'll hide the landing pad as well as our aircraft. Now let's go to Points Mode and take a look at the curve's resolution. So still we don't have as many points as we need for smooth deformations. So let's go ahead and add more points to this. We'll go ahead and highlight the entire spline. And now we can choose Mesh, Commands, Subdivide. Let's go to our options. And let's go ahead and increase this by 4. When we do that, we have much more points to work with. And what that means is, as many points as we see here, that's how many joints will be created. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. We'll go back to Model Mode, and with the spline selected, we can choose Character, Conversion, Spline to Joints. So now instantly you can see that we have a joint that follows the path of our spline. Very nice. Okay, so we no longer need that spline object. We can go in and remove it. Also, it'd be a good idea to rename our joint objects. I'll show you a fast way to do that. What we'll do is middle click to grab the entire hierarchy. And now we can go ahead and head over to Tools and use the Naming tool. Let's go back to our Attributes Manager. And here, we're simply going to go ahead and work with the Replace fields. So we will replace joint with BN underscore fuel line. I like to use BN when a joint is going to be tied to the skin of geometry, when it will deform that mesh. So let's go ahead and make sure that we have used a good naming structure, just so we can go in and again quickly access these objects if we need to modify them. Alright, so from there we can go ahead and choose Replace Name, and you can see that all of our joints have now been renamed. If we were to control click to expand the hierarchy, notice that's a fast way to expand the entire hierarchy of this chain. So now what we'd want to do from here is just go in and add numbers to the ends of each of these. That way we know exactly what joint is what. So I'm going to go ahead and start from the top here, and I'll go ahead and give this a number of 0, 1. And now we can go ahead and move down the chain and rename each of these. So from the first one, we can go ahead and actually press the down arrow on our keyboard to get to the next name. That will be underscore 02. I'll hit the down arrow. Now we can go ahead and use the right arrow to go to the end of the name. Again, that will be underscore 03. So I'll go ahead and pause the video and rename the rest of these. And as you can see, all the joints have now been renamed. So we should have about 41 or so. Alright, great. Well, now that we have our joints created, what we now need to do is figure out a way to have this chain connect into our aircraft. So let's go ahead and figure out that solution in the next lesson.